Hello everybody. Isn't it a lovely sunny day? I know, the sunshine makes me feel so happy. It's a really, really happy feeling I've got. Have you got a really, really happy feeling, Kyle? No. Oh dear. What's the matter? You're a bit unhappy? Oh, Kyle, why are you unhappy? Why is Kyle unhappy? You're a bit confused. Okay. What are you confused about? Right, you've heard on the news that all the restrictions are starting to lift from lockdown. Yes, they are, and we're able to do a few more things now, aren't we? But you've also heard on the news that there are some more cases of COVID. That does sound a little bit confusing, doesn't it? Yeah? Well, I think we have to kind of trust that the people who are making the big decisions are understanding what's going on, okay? And what I want you to remember, Kyle, is I will always be here to keep you and Amy and Sammy and Bunny safe, yeah? And Poppy, Rosie and Taffy, yes, all of you. I'm here to keep you safe, and I won't let anything happen to you that's going to be dangerous or risky or anything like that, okay? Is that all right? Shall we have a little cutch? We'll have a little cut. Poor Kyle. I can understand why he's confused, and some of you are probably a bit confused as well. But you need to trust me, okay? Trust that I'm going to keep you safe, and trust that someone else who's in control of things is going to keep us safe, isn't it? We trust God, don't we, at times like this when things get a little bit confusing. Oh, I tell you what I've got to help us. This is a song that someone wrote at the beginning of the very first lockdown, and it was a song about how we can all hope in God. We can put our hope in God to look after us, okay? Would you like to listen to this song? Yeah, see if it makes you feel a bit happier. Yes, and the song is actually called Hope. It's a good name for it, isn't it? Let's have a little listen to this song.
When the world is hurting, when life is so confusing, I am sure of one thing, God's by my side, yeah. When I'm feeling lonely and I start to worry, I know God, you're near me and you're always by my side, yeah. And I can lift my hands up to you, I can raise my voice and sing. You are who I put all hope in, I will trust you in everything. There is hope, there is hope in the Lord, He is with me each day. I will trust in the day. I have hope in the Lord, He is mighty and good. There is hope in the Lord. When the world is hurting
did you think of that song? It was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah, it's good that we can hope in God to look after us, even when times are difficult, isn't it? But can you imagine that there was a time when the disciples didn't fully realise that God was always going to be with them? But they very gradually learned all about that, yeah? So it must have been really strange for them in the beginning. I mean, if we have questions about God, we can go to church, can't we? And we can talk to people in church. But they didn't have churches then. And they didn't have people already there to tell them what to do when they worship God. In fact, they didn't even have church buildings at all. No, they didn't. No, that's amazing, isn't it? They would actually meet together in people's houses. That's where they had their church. We couldn't imagine having all the people that normally come to church come to our house, could we? We wouldn't fit them all in, would we? No, I know, but that's what they... Oh, hang on, here's a picture. Look at this. This is a picture of a Roman family having what we would now call a church service, or in the Salvation Army we call them meetings. Now, after a while, the numbers of people in the church grew. So they also stopped getting arrested for being Christians. Can you imagine that? In the beginning, yeah, you would get arrested. It wasn't allowed. That's risky, isn't it? So that's partly another reason why they met in people's houses, so they could do it in secret. But when that stopped happening and there were a lot more people following Jesus, they started to get their own buildings. And this picture, this is one of the earliest church buildings in the entire world. Now, you see the buildings around it, they look quite old, don't they? But even they were built long after that church was built. When Christianity first came to Britain, well, the churches were very, very simple buildings. They would have been wooden buildings to start off with, and then they got built in brick and stone. And this is a picture of a very old church building in Ireland, yeah? But gradually, as more and more people became Christians, and it got to the stage, can you imagine this, where virtually everybody in Britain went to church on a Sunday. Can you imagine everybody going to church on Sunday? You'd need much bigger buildings, wouldn't you? And that's when they started building big churches that we call cathedrals. Now, we still have a lot of cathedrals in Britain today. Some of them are quite modern, but others are quite old, and even some of the modern ones have bits of them that go back for hundreds and hundreds of years. And when you go to places that have got a cathedral, you can normally go and visit them. Yeah, I love to visit cathedrals. I like to go and sit in them, and it's often quite quiet and peaceful, or to look at all the stonework, and sometimes they have tombs in them from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So you should go and visit a cathedral someday, yeah? The other type of building we have in Britain for church services are things called chapels. And chapels are generally not as elaborate, not as ornate as the big churches. So here's a picture of a chapel. Now, in other countries, churches can look very, very different. So here's one from Norway, and it's made of wood. And it's fairly typical of the type of churches that they have in Norway. Now, this pretty church is a very, very famous one. It's called St. Basil's Church, and it's in Russia, in the city of Moscow. Look at all the pretty colours. Now, in America, now they have, everything's bigger in America, isn't it? They have things called mega churches, and these are absolutely huge, and thousands of people can meet together for a church service all together on a Sunday. I don't think I like that. I like the fact that when I go to church, I know everybody else that's there. I don't think I'd like thousands of people to be there, but that suits some people. What about the Salvation Army, our church? When did we start? Well, we started by a man called William Booth, and he started off without buildings at all. Some of his earliest meetings were held inside big tents like this one. They called it the Tent Mission. But a lot of Salvation Army meetings actually happened out on the street. See, that's because William Booth felt that God had called him to go and help the poorest people with the biggest problems, particularly in our cities. And these people, well, they were a bit embarrassed to go to church. They felt they looked too poor. And unfortunately, some of the nice, richer people who went to church didn't make them feel very welcome. It's not being like Jesus, is it? No. So one of the things they didn't like right from the start was a lot of these leaders of these services. So the Salvation Army used leaders who were women, and that was at a time when women weren't allowed to do all the same things as men. In particular, they weren't allowed to lead churches. So these groups of Salvation Army people, when they were out on the streets having their meetings, would often get attacked while they were holding their church service. Can you imagine that? Well, gradually, the Salvation Army as well started to have its own buildings, although we still do meetings in the open air sometimes. This picture is our building in Abertillery. But when the Salvation Army in Abertillery first started, and ours was first started by 2 lady officers, the services were actually held in a pub. But our building was built in 1885. That's a long time ago, wasn't it? So there are lots of different types of churches. And I guess when you hear the word church, you probably do think of a building, don't you? Yeah? But what if I told you that church means something else? Amazing. Let's watch this video.
So, a long time ago, there was a guy named Jesus. He was God's son. God's rescue plan for us. He came to earth, healed people, told them about God, and then he died for us. He paid the price for our sin, because sin always has a price. After that, he came back to life, and then he went to heaven to be with his dad again. His dad is God. But Jesus had taught his friends how to be like him. So even though they couldn't see him, they could act like him. That meant sharing with each other, loving each other, praying for each other, because it reminded them of Jesus. And they did even cooler things too. Because when Jesus left, he gave them something. The Holy Spirit. Which meant they could do miracles, teach other people, heal people, and most importantly, they could talk with God. And so can we. Jesus called them the church. Now sometimes, when we think about church, we might think about a building or a place. But church isn't a building. Actually, the church is people. I'm the church. You're the church. We are the church. All of us. When we act like Jesus, we are being the church. When you help, you're the church. When you pray for someone, you're the church. When you show love, you're the church. When you tell people about Jesus, you're the church. When you obey, you're the church. We are the church. And one day, Jesus will come back for his church. He'll finish the rescue plan he started. It will be incredible. And that's an amazing part of God's story.
So hang on a minute. We're the church. It's us. When Jesus said that he was going to build a church, he didn't mean he was going to build a building. He meant a group of people who were going to live the way he lived. And that's us. Ooh, let's read some of those Bible verses together. Now remember, this is about what happened to the disciples and the other believers after God's special helper, remember the Holy Spirit, came to help them. Let's read this together. So here we are. We're reading from the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. They spent their time learning the apostles' teaching, and they continued to share, to break bread, and to pray together. The apostles were doing many miracles and signs, and everyone felt great respect for God. All the believers stayed together. They shared everything. They sold their land and the things they owned. Then they divided the money and gave it to those people who needed it. The believers met together in the temple every day. They all had the same purpose. They broke bread in their homes, happy to share their food with joyful hearts. They praised God, and all the people liked them. More and more people were being saved every day. The Lord was adding those people to the group of believers. I wonder what miracles and signs they did. Ooh. And how do you think they felt selling all their things to share out the money? Would you want to do that? And I wonder what the disciples' worship was like. I mean, they wouldn't have sung the same sorts of songs that we sing today in church, because that type of music came a lot later, didn't it? And it seems that sharing meals, that's what it means when they keep saying they broke bread. It meant they shared their meals together. And that was really important to them, wasn't it? I wonder why that was. Can you think of why that might be? It's nice, isn't it? It's nice to have a meal together. And I wonder what helped the disciples keep their faith and trust in Jesus, particularly when, do you remember I said you could get arrested for following Jesus? So they had a lot of trust, didn't they, in Jesus? And how do we show that we trust Jesus today? Remember we said about trusting him when you came and told me you were a bit upset? Yeah. And the disciples really wanted to worship God. And that's the same as today, isn't it? We really want to worship God and tell him how much we love him. And they wanted to meet together and they wanted to share their experiences and care for one another. Now, how we do that changed a lot during lockdown. Hopefully, we're now slowly going to go back to normal, and hopefully soon we're going to be able to meet again. So what do you think has kept Jesus' followers today staying strong and trusting God all the time that we haven't been able to meet one another? I mean, I know there have been online services, but I'm actually talking about that special helper that we learnt about last week. Do you remember? We did pictures, didn't we? Pictures to remind us of God's special helper, the Holy Spirit. That's why you remembered, yeah. And we said that God sends his Holy Spirit to his followers, and that gives us strength to keep going. It gives us faith and helps us trust that God is there for us, helping us every minute, every second of every day, even when times are tough. Like when you said you were a bit worried about things now, yeah? And God is going to be with us through his special helper. So what important things have we learned today? Well, we've learned that we are the church. Yeah, that's cool. He likes that. You like that, didn't you, Kyle? Yeah, we are the church, and we like to get together. We like to worship God together in the same way as those very first Christians did. And it was difficult for them sometimes because they were learning how to be the church. They were learning how to do it. But they trusted God's Holy Spirit to guide them and help them. And we can trust the same Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit is exactly the same today as it was 2,000 years ago. And we can trust that that Holy Spirit is going to help us too when times are difficult. Things like lockdown starting to lift. All of those difficult times, God's Holy Spirit is there for us to help us. And it's going to be good to get back to meeting together, to break bread, to share in things together, but also to share in worshipping God. So I think we should have a little prayer time now, yeah? Slightly different type of prayer time this week, yeah? You like the different ones. We're going to listen to a Christian song. Now you say, Ju, we listen to songs every week. This is different. This is one of the earliest Christian hymns, right? The words are actually in the Bible. It's mentioned in some of the letters that Paul wrote to some of his Christian friends. And he's writing them in his letter as a song that is already being used in Christian worship at that time. So it literally is one of the oldest hymns ever. Now, we don't know the tune, no, because Paul couldn't record the tune. There was nothing that you could record music with. But this very clever person who knows a lot about what music kind of sounded like all that time ago has actually made some music to go with it. Now, the words are in Greek, and not even the same sort of Greek that's around today. So some of you might have been on holiday to Greece, okay? Different type of Greek they speak now in Greece to the sort of Greek they spoke when the church first started going. But a lot of the early Christians did speak Greek. So this song is in Greek. So you'll see the words in Greek, but also in English as well. And remember, the tune, we don't know whether this was actually the tune that was used, but it's the type of music that they had then. And it's a very atmospheric piece of music. It's very, very slow. And when we listen to very slow pieces of music in church, we sometimes call it contemplative music, which means it gives us a chance to think about each word that we're listening to or each word that we're singing. So we're not just rushing through it, we are really, really thinking about those words. So that's what I want you to do, right? Don't just listen to it and just forget about it and not concentrate on the words. We are going to listen to it and we're going to think about the words and think about what they're saying about God and what they're saying about God to us. And this is how we're praying this week, okay? Don't forget the worksheets, all right? You've got your worksheets for doing your extra activities yourself and with your family, and they'll be on the Facebook page so you can download them. But now we're going to have a prayer time by listening to this lovely piece of music from a long time ago. Even before I was born, cheeky. Yes, long time ago. And then we're going to see you again next week. Don't worry, you can trust in God because he sent his helper to be with us. Bye-bye.